On a recent Monday night, our small group Bible study talked about the Marcan Miracles, the miracles in the book of Mark. And I wanted to share some of my impressions of that study with you right now. First of all, I really like the book of Mark. It's short. It's not only the shortest of the Gospels, but it's also really punchy. It moves from one little vignette, one story, to the other. And so if you wanted to skim through and look at the miracles that are in that book, it wouldn't take you too long. There are roughly 20 miracles. The whole book is only about a dozen pages. You flip through, each account is maybe a couple of sentences. So you could easily go through in some number of minutes and take a look at all of the miracles that are in that book. Now, I have to confess that I did this Bible study many years ago, before my children were born. And so I asked people there in our group to to talk about whatever miracles they wanted. Now, one of my family members was present at the time, and in our family, we discussed things vigorously, let's say. And so when I asked, well, what miracles are there in the book of Mark? One of my family member present raised their hand and said, well, I think it's a miracle that anyone even believes this stuff at all. So I thought that was interesting that that member of my family does not go to church or anything like that. But I thought it was an interesting point that the whole question of faith itself and whether or not we see things as miracles is itself somewhat of a miracle. Anyhow, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm just going to take all of those miracles at face value. Now, I think it's useful to start by talking about what kinds of miracles Jesus performed. And I think of them in 5 different categories. One would be healing, physical healing. Examples would be where Jesus repaired the hand, a shriveled hand of a person, or made a fever go away, or healed a paralytic, or healed a leper. So physical healing. Second might be that same thing except on steroids, namely reviving someone from the dead. And so we have an account of a little girl who had died. He takes her by the hand and says, get up, and she gets up. A third category might be casting out of evil spirits, demoniacs, casting out demons. Fourth category might be the feeding miracles, like feeding 4,000 people, 4,000 men, women and children besides, or 5,000. And then finally, another kind of miracle would be Jesus demonstrating his mastery over nature. For example, walking on water or calming a storm. One of the things that I think is interesting is to compare those kinds of miracles to some other benchmark. Here is an example. What about the wizards in Harry Potter? I don't know if you're familiar with Harry Potter, but can wizards in Harry Potter heal people physically? And they can. Can they revive someone from the dead? No, they cannot. Sirius Black, Dumbledore, may they rest in peace. Can they cast out evil spirits? Well, wizards are on par with evil spirits. Can they feed people miraculously? Well, it turns out in the wizarding world in Harry Potter, you cannot create food, although maybe you can change kinds of food, but you can't really manufacture food. And then finally, can you calm nature? And I asked my Harry Potter friends, and that one gets a little complicated. Another benchmark might be modern science or modern technology, modern medicine. Which of these miracles can modern technology do? Can it heal people? Can it cure fevers, restore a withered hand, and heal an epileptic or a leper or so on? Yes, I would say so. Can modern medicine revive someone from the dead? No. Can they heal a demoniac? Well, modern medicine doesn't even think about what a demoniac is. Although if you take a look at some of the descriptions, For example, in Mark 5, there's a demoniac who lives out in the tombs and he's screaming. He has superhuman strength. He's cutting himself. He's crying in anguish all the time. And so I think about mental health. So can we cure mental health issues? Yes, I would say we can. Can we feed people miraculously? Well, somewhat. There's the Green Revolution and so on. And can we calm storms? I think we would have to say not yet. So it's just interesting to take a look at the miracles of Jesus and compare to such benchmarks. But another characteristic of Jesus's miracles is that, he doesn't do any parlor tricks. He doesn't do anything destructive. All of the miracles he does are for other people's good. Maybe the exception to that might be this case of the withered fig tree, where he curses a fig tree because it had no fruit. I don't know what to do with that one. Now, another characteristic of these miracles is he often tells people, don't tell anyone. Now, why would he do that? Why would he ask people to keep these things a secret? And I think an important thing to keep in mind is that although some of these miracles were in public and or for teaching a set of people, most of the time what happened was people came to him and asked him for something, asked him for healing, to calm a storm, to cast out an evil demon, and so on. And the resulting fame and attention that came of that was disruptive of Jesus's privacy, namely his opportunity to get any rest, and it disrupted and distracted from his teaching. And in fact, in Mark 7, it talks about him coming into a town, but he could not keep his presence a secret. He just couldn't get away from people, and it distracted from his teaching. Now, this brings to mind another important point, which is that people approached Jesus. There were, again, a couple of opportunities for Jesus to make a point, to teach in public, and therefore, and for that reason, he would perform a miracle. But in most cases, people were coming to Jesus and asking him for these things. Now, the people who came to Jesus were, in most cases, allied. They were, for example, there was the little girl who had died. She was the daughter of the leader of the synagogue. Or a paralytic was brought to Jesus and brought by a number of friends who, in fact, climbed up onto the roof and let the paralytic down, and so on. So a lot of these people were allied. They were part of society, but importantly, some of them were not. There was, again, the demoniac who lived out in the tombs. People were afraid of him. There was a blind beggar on the side of the road who had to shout out, and the crowd tried to quiet him down. There was a hemorrhaging woman who would have been outcast from society. And so what made a big impression on me is how Jesus reached out to those people who were unallied, who were alone. The mechanism that Jesus uses to perform these miracles is often just voice command, and it could even be remote. And there's one story in particular which does not appear in Mark. It appears in Matthew and Luke, of a centurion, a Roman military leader, who intercedes on behalf of one of his servants and asks Jesus for that healing. So Jesus says, okay, come on, let's do it. And the centurion says, no, I'm not even worthy to have you come to my house. But I understand chain of command. If someone gives me an order, I do it. If I give an order, it gets done. So I believe that if you simply give the word, the miracle will happen. And sure enough, Jesus gives his word, and the healing takes place remotely. And we see the same thing in Mark, where someone asks for healing and then goes home and finds that in that particular case, the daughter had been healed. So healing these miracles can be performed by voice. Jesus says to the storm, be still, or Jesus says to the demoniac, be still. He commands, and the miracle takes place. But importantly, there are also very tactile, hands-on healings. For example, Jesus touching someone, or Jesus mixing his spittle with dirt and then putting it on a person. Someone, a hemorrhaging woman, pushing through a crowd. Everyone is jam-packed around Jesus, and this woman squeezes through the crowd, tries to reach his cloak, and as soon as she touches it, she feels she's healed. And at the same time, Jesus notices that someone has touched him and power has gone out from him. And he asks, who touched me? And his disciples are astounded. Everyone is touching you. Everyone's pressed in on you. But the mechanism of the miracle was hands-on. It was very much touch. Another interesting observation to me of these miracles is what happens afterwards. And in many cases, what happens is, in some sense, normalcy results. For example, Simon's mother-in-law was healed from a fever. And as soon as she's healed, she gets up and resumes her normal activities. Or the little girl brought back from the dead, she gets up and she has something to eat. But the impact on the observers is very different. Often they are mystified or even terrified. And so again, in this case of the Gerasene demoniac, this man possessed with evil spirits who's out in the tombs and screaming and cutting himself and breaking chains with his superhuman strength. After he's healed, he's sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And the people were afraid. So the effect of observing one of these miracles could be very upsetting to people. I guess I would just conclude with one last thing. And this was the impression that sat most heavily on me after we had our Bible study. If you want to look through Mark for accounts of miracles, you could start in chapter 1, and right away you see a couple of miracles, and you flip the page to chapter 2, more miracles. Flip the page, there are more miracles. It's easy to find these miracles. All you do is you start at the beginning of this very short book, leaf through page by page, each one delivering some miracles. After a while, there are bigger breaks between these miracles, where Mark devotes text to Jesus's teaching, to his parables. But then suddenly, somewhere around Mark chapter 10 or 11, out of a book of 16 chapters, so barely halfway through, suddenly the miracles stop. And that happens to be at a time when Jesus is facing his own suffering, tribulation, and death. So the person who did so much for so many either gave up or lost his miraculous powers when he himself needed them the most.